All right, I think we can go ahead and get started here. Once again, this is the weekly office hours for teams these days with a working from home focus. And it is 30 minutes each week where I am here to answer any questions you may have. It's one of those Ask Me Anythings, AMAs you may have seen social media. So if you do have a question, you've been dying to ask someone, feel free to put it in the Q&A chat and I'll see it and try to respond to that. If there are no questions or while I wait for questions, I always try to put a little bit of info into these. And I thought today I would talk about tabs. So in the previous weeks, which you can get all the recordings for this at the same link that you use today. When it's not a live session, it'll be the listing of the recording. So I've done channel meetings. I've talked about having meetings in general. I try to do different topics, and today I want to talk about tabs. But as always, I'll give 60, 90 seconds worth of what is Teams in case this is your first time joining versus having attended these every week. So I am here in my development environment or demo environment. So let me just do a quick 60-second walk around of Teams, and I'll actually start here at the left rail from top to bottom. You'll see this as the activity button for my activity or notifications that are coming across Teams, across all of my teams, so I can see what things are happening, newest to oldest. And then if I click on anyone, it will take me right to that post wherever that thing occurred. So activity feed is where I sit most of the day. The chat area is what is most like what you may have been coming from if you're new to Teams. You may have been coming from Skype for Business, where you fire up a chat with anybody in the org, and this is the same thing, hitting the new chat button there and just starting to chat with anyone, whether it's individual or even multiple people. And that chat does persist as opposed to just kind of going away into the ether, the way you may have experience with Skype. The Teams button is another one where you'll sit, probably often, because this is where your teams are listed, both the ones that you like to show or favorite, as well as even the hidden teams that you decide, not to show, just to kind of keep your view clean and whatnot. And in each team is the channels that represent, and you can hide and show those as well, again, to help manage your notifications and to keep things clean. Go down, we have our calendar view, which is where we'll see our personal calendar, as well as the meetings that we're in. And as well, we have these buttons up here for starting a new meeting, whether we want to meet now in the moment or whether we want to schedule a meeting for later. Depending on how Teams is implemented in your agency, you may or may not have a calls tab, but Teams can be used as a full communication platform to make calls and receive calls and voicemail and all that good stuff. The files tab is there to show all my files across Teams and even give me a convenient place to get to my OneDrive files as well. And then again, depending on your implementation of Teams, you may or may not have apps as part of your Teams install. And if you do, you'll get to a point where you can pin some of those apps to the side, like Planner, for instance, or maybe even something like ServiceNow. So things of that nature can be on the side and can be accessed through just 3 dots. Don't forget about your search box at the top, where I can find, if I search for the word roads, find all the messages where roads got mentioned. And also even files where roads is in the title or even roads is in the document, even if it's a PDF. So it indexes all of that. And I could think lastly would be your area over here where you can do a few things, the most important of which is the settings area for coming in and setting your notifications. Make sure for personal mentions, you do have the email on, especially if you're new to Teams or your team is new to Teams, to help people, keep people from missing things. That mention concept comes into play when you're doing a message. At mention, hit the at symbol, and then I can at mention anybody I need to. send them a message, they're going to get that post in a separate notification. So Teams channels, the chat conversation, and then I should say the files tab here is where the files specific to that channel exist. Open and edit them here in Teams without leaving Teams, and even co-author in real time. Five of us can be in a document, seeing each other's cursors move around, all that good stuff. And then the last thing we have is tabs, which hopefully that was a good segue into tabs, because that's what I want to talk about today. And tabs are a place where we can really pin key assets. And you can see here, this is a government tenant that my demo environment is using. So this is what you have from the government perspective, and you may or may not have some third-party apps which were just recently introduced to the government cloud, down here. So depending on how many apps get implemented for you, this third-party list could get long, but it could be nothing or it could be small. But these are the ones that will definitely be there for the government cloud, and even a few more if you are in a commercial cloud. So let's talk about a few of these. So first off, just to see what it looks like to have a tab in there, let's take a look at a few examples. So this one here is apparently some website that I didn't log into. Let me use something a little better. Here's a website tab. You can see that here is the website tab, and as it implies, it's a tab to a website that maybe your team wants to frequent. This happens to be the blog, but all right. And so it's just a window into that website. Of course, if this was an interactive website, this might be even more interesting as a tab, because now I can come here and actually do some things interactively inside of it. So so that could be useful. So that's the website tab. You can see here in this team, they've also got tabs to Word docs. All right, so that's just the Word tab there. And I think they may have, they've got 2 Word docs in here, but certainly you could do Word, Excel, or PowerPoint in terms of Office files. The ones I want to point out that are also kind of interesting, Yes Planner and Power BI is there, but I also want to point out the SharePoint tab here. So here is where we can add pages or lists. And I'm a longtime SharePoint fan. My consulting career was all about SharePoint. And while there are no lists in this site, lists are very useful. I mean, if you're doing something in Excel and it's a relatively straightforward table, it probably is a good candidate for being put in SharePoint. And I would say, I mean, that's a whole nother session, but I would say there's probably a dozen things you kind of get by making that move into a SharePoint list. So if you are using lists, just know that they can be added here with the tab as well. And then if you're using pages, which I also encourage, and we'll go ahead and add one here. Any page in a SharePoint page can be added here too. And you'll notice when I added it, unlike the website tab where it's basically a window to a full-blown website, this kind of is an elegant integration here. If I was to open the same page by hitting this button here, I don't know if you notice this little like globe-looking button is to open this thing in the browser. You'll see that actually is the page to a full site with the title of the site and the blue bar at the top and the links on the bottom and all of these things. But again, when I added it in as a SharePoint page or as a SharePoint tab, it took away all of that stuff from the top and the side. In fact, because SharePoint Modern Pages are responsive, by design, I don't know if you paid attention that, there is actually a couple of web parts here on the side, but those are actually showing down at the bottom because being that it's responsive, it knew that it was in a more squeezed kind of a frame, and it pushed things around to make them look nice in that frame. So so these tabs, are more than just glorified bookmarks. They are elegant integrations of the thing that you're trying to, make a tab for. So if you do have a page that maybe has a lot of cool web parts on it for your team, adding that as a SharePoint page can be useful. The other tab that is useful related to SharePoint is this one, the document library one. And you can see it's already trying to maybe suggest some areas here. Let me just choose one. But I could use a direct SharePoint link to some document library out there, but I'll hit next. In this case, I want the documents library there. And I could name it, something, probably in this case, finance documents, and hit save. And I have what essentially looks like my files tab, right? So again, all the fluff around this site, if I were to open it in SharePoint, all the fluff from this is gone that I would normally see. So that's the actual folder there, and all the stuff on the top and around it and everything. So that's gone. I get a look that looks very similar to the files tab of the actual team. And a point to note here is these tabs don't magically pass permissions into that thing, right? So if I've linked to a library that this user happens to have access to, if somebody else on the team doesn't have access to this tab's not going to magically give them access. It'll give them some message about access denied or something like that. So when you're adding these tabs for your team, be aware of that. Add tabs that the team actually has access to. Otherwise, they're going to get an error message. But if everybody does have access to the thing you're linking to, then it's a very elegant world, right? I can see this tab now just like I can the files tab. And in fact, because this is again a modern site and SharePoint Online, I mean, it still feels like I'm working with a document in my team, even though it happens to be in some other team or some other library as well. So those I find are very useful. I don't know if these two SharePoint ones get a lot of use, but they do have a lot of use in it. And maybe at some point on a future session here, I'll talk about SharePoint lists. I do think that's an underutilized list many times, and especially for you as a Teams user, know that you got Teams, but you also got SharePoint behind the scenes, which means you have lists that you can use to help your team manage work. Okay, so that's I just kind of wanted to show some of the tabs there. I'll also kind of mention from a Planner. Planner's pretty popular for Teams users as well to manage tasks. One thing I usually have to point out is Planner is a separate service that exists outside of Teams. Teams is just giving you an elegant integration or window into it, but you can certainly go to your front homepage for Office 365 and get to Planner in and of itself. So I don't need Teams to do Planner, but because I have Planner and I have Teams, I can integrate them. So the tab not only shows me some plan that exists, but even makes it easy for me to create a new one as well. And in this case, though, do I have any existing ones? No, so let's make a new one then. So I would create a plan and name it here. And so Teams is again doing the work for me of actually in that separate service making the plan and then integrating it here. And again, it's doing it elegantly. If you've ever seen Planner, there's certainly other things that would show, but I'm seeing the main things here, which are my different buckets, my ability to add tasks here. I can drag and drop the task just like I normally would. I can see the schedule, see the charts related to the task, all that good stuff right there in a tab. So this is when the tabs kind of start to shine a little more, because now I'm getting work done in this tab as opposed to just kind of passively viewing some content. So that's a pretty nice feature as well. The other thing I like to talk about with tabs is this ability to talk about the tab, right? So for every tab, there's the chat button here. And so in this case, for instance, let's kind of take it back out to here. This is obviously this is the test 1, 2, 3 plan, but it could be the, Windows 10 rollout, plan. And if I wanted to ask the team about it, I might, at team and say, are we on track for this, project plan? So and people would respond and have all these conversations again right next to the actual plan. So, and this is the case for any tab. I can talk about, or we can have conversations about the tab right next to the tab itself. If I go back out to the chat area, you'll see that these conversations are still visible here as well in front of everyone. So it says here, I added a tab, and here's the conversation that started. All those tabs I added, I left the checkbox checked for, making a post out to the chat area for that tab. So so that's kind of cool. And again, I could even talk about that tab even out here as well. And if somebody happened to be in the tab, they would see it there, as well. So that's a nice piece to it, is this ability to chat about the tab. Also, if I wanted to reference this tab or any tab, there's always the three dots and the copy link to this tab. So I may want to come out here and say, have you looked at the project plan, and then Control V, and I get the nice, elegant URL for it, such that when everybody sees that, I can get rid of that. They can click here and they go right to the tab. They don't have to leave Teams. In fact, that's elegant enough. They're not even sent out to the browser where Planner may exist, right? They're kept within Teams. In the case of Planner, that even applies to a task itself. Copy link to this task, right? If I wanted to actually reference that, Control C, I can come out to a post. This wasn't meant to be a Planner session here, but we just happen to be talking about that. But again, I can post that particular link to that task, and again, click that and be taken right to the tab and have that particular task open up. So again, that's where that that's why I would use the word tabs. The tab is integrating Planner, because it's really a lot more than just a little window into a Planner. That you can see it's a little more elegant than that. So that's that conversations piece. And again, always remember this go-to website, right? If for some reason the tab feels stifling, like maybe something like not enough room, that's actually solved with this expand tab piece. You can see it got rid of all my other stuff so that I can kind of stay in the moment. I can get rid of the conversation if I wanted to. So that's a useful one. But also, again, go to the website. It's going to open it in the browser. And now this is the full-blown Planner with all the bells and whistles. So I'm always one click away from getting to the full-blown thing if I need that. And it is using browser technology. So this concept of refresh or reloading the tab is still a thing. If you feel like something's not refreshing, that's the refresh button, and a copy link, right? So yeah, so that's the Planner one specifically. OneNote is a fan favorite for many people, and it took a while for that to get to Government Cloud, but it is here. And of course, again, it is also a lot more than just a window. Obviously, it knows about all of the notebooks that I might have access to, but also lets me create a new one right from this tab as well. And that's pretty useful because of the fact if I go to the files area on this new button, I don't yet have a OneNote, new OneNote thing that's coming. But without that OneNote tab, I would have to open this in SharePoint. And in SharePoint, I certainly have a new OneNote notebook there. So, but because we now have the tab, we don't have to go out to SharePoint for creating a new OneNote anymore. We just use the tab, and it helps us create a new notebook, right with the tab. Okay. What else was I going to show? Yeah, chatting about it. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the Q&A area. The other one that gets some usage, tends to be the Power BI. So again, I've got one there, but it knows about my workspace. It knows about even other teams that I'm in, so it can do that for me. And then the wiki, every channel already has a wiki tab, but you can create more. If I go here, I can create another one. It's telling me I already have one with that name, but I can create wiki 2. and it does as you would expect. Now, you may notice the lack of a conversation button up here, but you may notice that it does exist within. That's one unique thing about the wiki tab functionality. As I am making new pages with content, all right, blah, 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 and then some more, a new section here, section 2, and add some content. I can now actually talk about the section itself. So now I'm having a conversation about the, of course I should have named it better, but the ADS blah, blah, blah section. I might want to say some things about that, all right, which would be different from my conversations about section 2. All right, I might want to say some things about that. And again, all of those things, now as I'm in the wiki, I can always go, okay, what did my team members say about section 2? I'm always one click away from seeing that conversation. And then out in the chat area, again, those 2 particular sections are getting their own conversation thread out in here. So I don't even have to go into the section of the wiki to add, my thoughts to that conversation. So that's a little different nuance that the wiki tab has versus the other ones. Okay. And of course, with our Word docs, these tabs also have the edit buttons. Either edit them in Teams in the desktop app or the browser. No matter where I open them, I'm getting the power of co-authoring, real-time co-authoring, because they are stored in SharePoint. And I still have the open in SharePoint button as well. But again, just like the others, I have the ability to have a conversation about those as well with that tab, as well as go not full screen, but expand it across the screen, reload, and copy a link to the tab. Okay. The other thing that from a tab perspective, if we are looking at files, if I do want to create a new tab to, let's say, a Word doc, I can certainly click that, come in here, find the doc. I also get a quick and easy way to create a tab. Let's say I'm in the files area, the department budgets document. That's probably something I should pin for the team. 3 dots here, I actually have make this a tab. And with one click, I've now made that new document a tab, as opposed to the probably 3 or 4 clicks if I would just had used the plus button. So that's something to keep in mind. And I think that would apply for all the Office files at least. And I don't know if I've got a PDF in here, but I think I have to. A PDF might not be there for the GCC yet. I'd have to try that out. So you can also see here that I can have tons of tabs, and as I get a lot of tabs, they'll eventually get grouped into this, in this case, 5 or more, could be 20 or more, and then you'd start to see them, come down the bottom. As I click one, it kind of puts itself there, and there is some ability to move them around. You can see I just moved this test 1, 2, 3 plan in front of the wiki. So you could have a lot of lists, a lot of tabs here. I don't know that I'd have a recommendation about don't do too many tabs. I'm one of those folks that says make as many things as you need, because we've got so many options that are features at our disposal for hiding and managing what we see. So don't limit yourself in the attempt to try to keep the look of it clean. The end user has the ability to clean up their look on their own. But if you were getting into the 20 and 30 and 40 tabs here, you might just consider some kind of naming convention, maybe to help group them or sort them. Might be something to consider. And I'm trying to think what else we would talk about with tabs. Again, when your third-party apps come, it kind of just depends on the tab itself in terms of what its functionality will be. But usually when a third-party app is integrated into Teams, that's kind of how it tends to manifest itself, is through some kind of tab interface, or sometimes even a bot or something like that. So what that tab will do kind of depends on how that integration was implemented. Um, I would say don't expect the tab to literally do everything that you could do with that third-party service in its actual website. It's usually a subset of the features, and that's because it's really they're trying to make the most used features easily accessible in Teams. But I don't see most people trying to literally duplicate every feature of their third-party service in that tab or in that Teams integration. So just keep that in mind. Um, so again, hopefully that was helpful. I'm not seeing any questions on Q&A, so I must have answered everything you've ever wanted to know about Teams, which was my goal. So I was successful apparently. But yeah, feel free to reach out if you think of other questions. But hopefully that really helped to kind of dive into what what tabs are and how they can be used across your teams. So with that, I'll give you back 4 minutes of your Friday. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next week, Friday, 10 a.m. All right.